Hello students, in this class we'll try to know what are reflexes, what are different types of reflexes. Reflexes are basic unit of integrated neuronal activity. So by definition, reflex is a involuntary motor response to an adequate sensory stimulus. It depends on integrity of reflex pathway, or it can also be defined as the mechanism by which sensory impulse is automatically converted into motor effect through involvement of the central nervous system. Okay, so remember here that no involvement of the will. So reflex arc is a basic unit of reflex activity. So it consists of receptors, afferent neuron, dorsal root ganglion, anterior motor neuron, then efferents. So then at the end effector organ, that is muscle. So these are the components of reflex afferent limb. In afferent limb, we have receptor, afferent neuron or nerve, dorsal root or homologous ganglia in the cranial nerve. Efferent limb consists of motor neuron and efferent organ, that is muscle or a gland. Center is a part of CNS where afferent neuron directly or through interneurons make connections with uh, the brain. The can be integrated at different levels, uh, segmental level or brainstem level or at the cerebral cortical level. How do you classify reflexes? Reflexes can be classified based on the site of the receptors. So receptors can be classified as superficial, deep, or visceral or pathological receptors. So superficial, the receptors are present in skin or mucous membrane. In the deep reflexes, the receptors are present in muscle or tendons. In visceral, the receptors are present in the viscera, and these reflexes mainly governed by the autonomic nerves. Okay. Based on the anatomy, they can be classified depending on at the level of integration. They can be uh, classified as segmental, intersegmental, or suprasegmental. And based on the number of synapses, so the physiological classification can be monosynaptic, disynaptic, polysynaptic, or asynaptic. Okay, so example for monosynaptic reflex is a stretch reflex. Example for disynaptic or bisynaptic reflex is reciprocal innervation or autogenic inhibition reflex. Polysynaptic reflex, best example is withdrawal reflex, and example for asynaptic reflex is uh, axon reflex. According to the development, they can be unconditional or conditional. Unconditions are the inborn reflex, whereas conditioned reflexes are they are learnt after the birth. Coming to monosynaptic reflex, I mean it's also called as stretch reflex, deep reflex, myotatic reflex, or tendon reflex. The reflex activity occurs when the skeletal muscle with the intact nerve supply is stretched. So response to that muscle contracts. So this is called as stretch reflex. A stretch reflex is a feedback loop that maintains the muscle length and opposes stretching, and hence it is very important for the maintenance of muscle tone. The components of the stretch reflexes are stimulus is stretching of the receptor. The receptors are here are the muscle spindles. Afferents are carried by 1A fibers. Neurotransmitter secreted is glutamate. Efferent is alpha motor neuron, and response is contraction of the same muscle. Okay, so here the diagram showing the one example knee jerk where the tendon of the quadriceps muscle is tapped, so that causes the stretching of the muscle, and reflexly the same muscle contracts. Okay. So this is another diagram showing the knee jerk reflex. The peculiarities of knee or stretch reflexes are they are monosynaptic. Central delay is around 0.6 to 0.8 milliseconds. They are more well developed in anti-gravity muscles. Obviously, they are concerned with the muscle tone. They helps in the maintaining the posture. They are influenced by gamma motor neuron activity, uh, and gamma motor neuron activity. They are linked with alpha motor neuron activity, so which is called as uh, gamma alpha motor link. These reflexes are reinforced by Jundresic maneuver, so wherein the gamma motor neuron activity is going to sensitize the reflex activity. The response of this stretch reflex is influenced by various structures in the brain, and usually this overall influence is negative on the stretch reflex. And stretch reflex abolished when afferents or efferents are cut. Bisynaptic reflex is one of the example is a reciprocal innervation. Typically, stretch reflex is associated with contraction of agonist and relaxation of antagonist neuron, which is called as reciprocal innervation. Okay, so advantage of reciprocal innervation is it leads to smooth movement of the limb, and it reduces the energy requirement. Okay, so this is a diagram showing reciprocal inhibition. So with a normal stretch reflex in the uh, agonist muscle, so afferent here goes to the interneurons and acts on anterior motor neurons of the antagonist, and they lead to relaxation of antagonist muscle. So this is called as reciprocal inhibition. Another example for uh, the bisynaptic reflex is inverse stretch reflex or autogenic inhibition. So it is another protective response where excessive stretching or excessive contraction of the muscle is uh, inhibited. Okay. So here the stimulus is stretching of the tendon due to forceful contraction of the muscle. Receptor is Golgi tendon organs which are there in the tendon of the muscle. Afferents are carried by mainly IB fibers which are myelinated, and center is inhibitory neuron in the same segment. Efferents are alpha motor neurons innervating the same muscle. Okay, so this diagram showing the innervation stretch reflex when the muscle there is a strong contraction, the tendons are stretched, and so the Golgi tendon organ. Okay, so that sends that causes the inhibition of the anterior motor nerves, anterior horn cells, which are innervating the muscle, and it will lead to the relaxation of that particular muscle. So muscle tone is nothing but the resistance of muscle uh, to the stretch. Okay, so there can be hypotonia or hypertonia. Polysynaptic reflexes are again they can be where they involve multiple synapses. They can be of different type: flexor response, withdrawal response, or the cross extensor response. Okay, so flexor response, it can occur by noxious or non-noxious stimuli over the skin, withdrawal reflex by weak noxious stimulation over the skin, and cross extensor can be by strong noxious stimulation over the skin. Okay, so this is diagram showing what is withdrawal reflex. Okay, so when the skin is stimulated, so it causes the flexion effect on that muscle, and extensor muscles are relaxed, and the flexion is facilitated. Okay, and when the stimulus is very strong, the impulses are going to irradiate, and they're going to cause the extension of the opposite limb, where the flexors are inhibited and extensors are contracted on the contralateral side. Okay, so it causes the contraction of the flexion of the ipsilateral side and extension of the contralateral side of the limb. Okay, so which is called as withdrawal and cross extensor reflex. Okay, so this is another diagram showing of the withdrawal reflex. Thank you.